The sun beat down mercilessly on the SWAT training facility in Austin, Texas, as Vanessa Miller stood in line with 20 other candidates, the only woman among them. I wonder where everyone's watching from today. Whether you've ever witnessed someone being underestimated right before they changed everything. Sweat trickled down her temples as she adjusted her tactical vest, trying to ignore the sideways glances and hushed comments from the men around her. Lieutenant Rogers, a stocky man with a permanent scowl etched into his weathered face, barked out names from his clipboard. Next up, Miller. When Vanessa stepped forward, a male candidate deliberately stuck out his foot. She stumbled, her equipment clattering loudly across the concrete as laughter erupted from the group. Maybe stick to organizing the office files, sweetheart. Rogers smirked, his voice carrying across the training yard. Some things just aren't meant for everyone, another instructor added with a dismissive wave. Woman like you should stay in dispatch. Leave the real work to those built for it. Several candidates pulled out their phones, recording her humiliation as she knelt to collect her scattered gear. But as Vanessa stood, her jacket shifted, revealing a glimpse of a military medal partially concealed in her pocket. Her eyes, momentarily flickering with something cold and precise, met Roger's gaze. For just a second, the lieutenant faltered. They thought they were rejecting another ordinary woman from the SWAT lineup. But they just humiliated the wrong sharpshooter. Vanessa Miller was an Austin native through and through. At 34, she lived in a modest apartment on the east side of the city, a space furnished simply except for one locked cabinet she never opened in front of visitors. The daughter of a high school math teacher and a nurse, she'd grown up with a quiet determination that surprised everyone who underestimated her. After graduating from the University of Texas, she had served 8 years in the Army as what her paperwork simply called a logistics specialist before returning home to Austin 3 years ago. Since then, Vanessa had been working as a 911 dispatcher for the Austin Police Department, her steady voice guiding officers through crisis after crisis. It was her exceptional calm during a school shooting incident, talking an injured officer through creating a tourniquet while coordinating backup that had caught the attention of Captain Rise, who reluctantly recommended her for SWAT training despite resistance from department leadership. The police department had included her in this training cycle, primarily to meet diversity requirements that the city council had been pushing, but everyone knew the statistics. No woman had ever completed the Austin PD's SWAT program. Most dropped out by week 2. What Vanessa's application didn't mention, what she deliberately kept vague, was her secondary role in the military. Her paperwork listed only Army logistics without a single reference to her position as a marksmanship instructor for the 5th Special Forces Support Team. After losing a fellow female soldier to friendly fire due to poor training practices, she had promised herself she would help reform tactical training standards, starting with her hometown department. But the memory still haunted her, sometimes waking her in the middle of the night, the echo of gunfire and screams following her into consciousness. I left violence behind when I hung up my uniform, she had told her sister when applying for the SWAT position. I wanted a quiet life, helping from behind the scenes. But these walls of prejudice won't fall unless someone confronts them directly. What she didn't say was that every time she heard dispatch calls go wrong, because tactical teams lacked proper coordination, she saw her friend's face. Some battles couldn't be fought from the sidelines. Every morning, Vanessa woke at 40:30 to fit in a full workout before her 6:00 a.m. shift at dispatch. Her routine hadn't changed since her army days. 3-mile run through the quiet streets of her neighborhood, followed by strength training in her spare bedroom. Converted into a simple home gym, the discipline kept her centered, especially as the SWAT training intensified. Her apartment walls were mostly bare, except for 2 photographs. One of her parents at her college graduation, and another of her unit in Afghanistan, taken a week before the ambush that had earned her the medal she now kept in her pocket. She had no dating profile, no active social life beyond occasional dinners with her sister's family in Round Rock. Her colleagues at the department often joked that Vanessa Miller didn't exist outside of work. She never corrected them. The simplicity of her life was a choice, not a limitation. What mattered wasn't being seen, but being ready. The morning after the first week of SWAT training, Vanessa stopped at Magnolia Cafe on Lake Austin Boulevard for breakfast. A rare indulgence she allowed herself once a week. As she waited for her coffee, she noticed a group of officers from the department at a corner booth. Detective Parker, a veteran with 20 years on the force, was holding court, his voice carrying across the half-empty restaurant. So then Roger says to her, "Miller, if you can't handle the weight of the gear, how are you going to drag a 200-pound man out of a firefight?" Should have seen her face like a deer in headlights. The table erupted in laughter as Vanessa stood frozen by the counter. Parker happened to glance up, noticing her for the first time. The laughter died awkwardly. Vanessa paid for her coffee, nodded politely to the table, and left without a word. In her car, she took a single deep breath before driving away. The coffee sat untouched in the cup holder. The first wave of rejection came from her colleagues at the police department. Detective Parker spotted Vanessa's application on the chief's desk during a meeting. He made no attempt to lower his voice as he picked it up, eyebrows shooting toward his receding hairline. "Vanessa Miller, the dispatcher." "You're kidding, right?" His laugh echoed in the office as he dropped the file back on the desk. "She flinches every time we clean our weapons in the break room. What's she going to do when bullets start flying for real?" Other detectives joined in, each with their own observation about why a dispatcher, especially a female one, had no business on SWAT. At first, her fellow dispatchers seemed supportive, offering congratulations when they heard about her application. But Vanessa couldn't help noticing how conversation stopped when she entered the break room. How smiles became just a little too bright. "You go, girl," they'd say to her face, but she overheard them in the parking lot. "She's making us all look bad with this SWAT fantasy. Like dispatchers aren't important enough." When she started practicing at the department range after hours, she suddenly found it booked for birthday celebrations and team-building exercises whenever she planned to use it. The message was clear: stay in your lane. The training instructors formed the next wall of rejection, their tactics more direct and punishing. Head instructor Captain Reynolds, a former Marine with a chest full of medals and a head full of traditional values, assigned her faulty equipment during exercises. When her radio failed during a critical scenario, cutting her off from the rest of the team, he simply shrugged. Equipment malfunction. "Miller, in real life, that's a dead team. Start over." The male candidates received immediate replacements for any malfunctioning gear. When demonstrating tactical movements through doorways and corridors, Instructor Sergeant Hayes deliberately used her as the bad example every time. See how Miller creates a larger target with her hesitation. This is exactly what gets officers killed. They made her carry heavier loads than her male counterparts, claiming equal standards while ignoring that the men rotated the extra weight among themselves. During a particularly grueling exercise in the Texas summer heat, Vanessa was assigned to carry the battering ram, a 4-helb steel cylinder normally rotated among team members. Hours into the drill, sweat soaking through her tactical gear, she faltered momentarily, adjusting her grip. Sergeant Hayes pounced immediately. Miller's compromising the entire operation. In real life, that hesitation means civilians die. Is that what you want, Miller? Dead hostages because you couldn't handle your equipment. The other candidates watched silently, some looking uncomfortable, but none speaking up. Vanessa readjusted the ram without responding and completed the exercise, her arms trembling with exhaustion, but her face betraying nothing. Later, in the locker room, she discovered her water bottle had been emptied and refilled with salt water. She poured it out silently, used the public fountain instead, and never mentioned the incident to anyone. During the 3rd week of training, Police Chief Wallace called Vanessa to his office. The wood-paneled room, with its wall of combinations, felt deliberately intimidating as he gestured for her to sit while Deputy Chief Morris stood by the window, arms crossed. "Miller, I'm going to be straight with you," Wallace began, leaning back in his leather chair. "This isn't about gender. It's about capabilities. The SWAT team can't afford weak links when lives are at stake." Deputy Chief Morris nodded solemnly. "Why have serious liability concerns? The physical demands alone. Have you considered how this affects department morale?" They spoke for 20 minutes about her valuable contributions to the department before offering her a prestigious administrative position instead, essentially filing paperwork for SWAT operations. "You'd be integral to the team," Wallace insisted, "just in a capacity more suited to your strengths." The dismissal in his tone required no translation. Vanessa sat perfectly still, the metal in her pocket pressing against her thigh, a reminder of what she had already endured. "With respect, sir, I'd like to complete the training program. As outlined in department policy, every candidate has the right to attempt qualification." Chief Wallace's expression hardened. "Policy is one thing, Miller. Reality is another. I've been running this department for 15 years. I know what works in the field." Vanessa met his gaze steadily. "So do I, sir, which is why I'm here." The tension in the room thickened until Deputy Chief Morris cleared his throat. "We can't technically prevent you from continuing, Miller, but consider this conversation guidance." As she left the office, Vanessa heard Wallace mutter to Morris, "Get me the qualification standards. See what we can adjust." She closed the door quietly behind her, her expression giving away nothing to the curious eyes watching from across the bullpen. The rejection spread beyond the department walls when a local news station ran a segment titled "Controversy at Austin PD. Should Standards Change to Accommodate Female SWAT Applicants?" They never mentioned Vanessa by name, but the beat roll footage clearly showed her in training. The reporter interviewed anonymous sources within the department who questioned whether physical standards would be lowered. At a community coffee shop the next morning, Vanessa overheard a conversation at the next table. "My husband's on the force. Says this woman's turning SWAT selection into some kind of political circus. If she can't cut it, she should just quit instead of making them change everything." Online police forums filled with memes mocking SWAT Barbie without naming her directly, but with enough specific details that her colleagues gave her knowing looks in the hallways. The morning after the news segment aired, Vanessa arrived at the training facility to find a child's plastic tiara taped to her locker with a note for our diversity princess. She removed it without comment and went through her preparations as usual. During the morning briefing, several candidates avoided eye contact, while others seemed to be suppressing smirks. Lieutenant Rogers made a point of announcing, "Today's exercises will follow the original standards set by this department. We don't lower the bar for anyone, regardless of external pressures." The emphasis on original standards and his pointed look in Vanessa's direction made the message clear. They believed she was trying to change the rules. The irony wasn't lost on her. They were already changing the rules, just not in her favor. Perhaps the most difficult rejection came from the system itself. During the official physical assessment in week 4, Reynolds announced new parameters with a thin smile. "New departmental standards," he said, looking directly at Vanessa. "Chief's orders." The minimum time for the obstacle course had decreased by 30 seconds. The required number of pull-ups had increased from 5 to 12. The shooting qualification suddenly required weapon disassembly and reassembly in record time, a requirement not listed in the original standards. When male candidates struggled with parts of the assessment, instructors offered coaching tips and encouragement. When it was Vanessa's turn, they walked away, clipboards in hand, already marking failures they expected to see. Despite everything, Vanessa completed each new requirement, not excelling, but passing. The pull-ups left her arms shaking, but she forced out the 12th with gritted teeth. The obstacle course she finished with 3 seconds to spare. The weapon disassembly caught her by surprise. But years of field maintenance under far worse conditions than an air-conditioned training room had prepared her well enough. With each test she passed, the expressions of the instructors darkened. They had expected, perhaps even hoped she would fail. Give them the excuse they needed to remove her from the program. When Reynolds reluctantly marked her as passing on his clipboard, his jaw was tight with frustration. "You just barely made it, Miller. Don't get comfortable." Vanessa simply nodded, conserving her energy for the next challenge rather than wasting it on a response. Throughout these challenges, Vanessa remained composed, but increasingly isolated. She completed each exercise without complaint, absorbing the criticism without visible reaction. But alone in her car, after particularly brutal training days, she would sit in the parking garage, hands gripping the steering wheel, until her knuckles turned white, eyes closed as she breathed deeply before driving home. Home in silence. The medal in her pocket awarded for saving 3 fellow soldiers during an ambush in Afghanistan remained her secret talisman, a reminder of what she had already survived. On the worst days, when the weight of isolation threatened to overwhelm her resolve, she would call her sister from the safety of her apartment. "I'm not sure it's worth it anymore. Sarah," she admitted one night after a training session where the entire class had been punished with extra exercises because of her slowness on the course. "Maybe I'm just proving their point." Her sister's response was gentle but firm. "The day you quit is the day they win, Van. And it's not just about you anymore." Sarah was right. Vanessa had started receiving emails from female officers in other districts, even other states, who had heard about her battle through the department grapevine. They were watching, waiting to see if the door could actually be opened. The final qualification week arrived with tension, hanging over the training facility like storm clouds. Candidates who had made it this far faced the culminating exercises that would determine who earned a place on the SWAT team. The morning began with Chief Wallace and several department heads arriving to observe, unusual for a standard qualification day. Reynolds gathered the remaining 12 candidates, Vanessa still among them despite everything, and announced the day's challenge. The department has arranged something special for our final shooting qualification, he said, unable to hide his satisfaction. This course was designed by military special forces consultants. Multiple targets, varying distances, position changes, and stress factors. This separates the real operators from the wannabes. His eyes lingered on Vanessa as scattered chuckles ran through the group of candidates. One by one, the male candidates attempted the course. Some performed admirably, others struggled with the unexpected difficulty. Sergeant Hayes kept a running commentary, praising good shots and offering immediate advice after mistakes. The atmosphere grew increasingly tense as the top performers set impressive scores. Vanessa stood quietly at the back, mentally rehearsing the course, her expression betraying nothing, as the last male candidate finished with what appeared to be the best score of the day. Lieutenant Rogers glanced at Vanessa with a smirk. "Miller, you're up. Last chance to show us what you've got." As she stepped toward the starting position, Rogers loudly added to another instructor. $10 says she doesn't hit half the targets." The qualification area fell silent as Vanessa approached the starting position. She methodically checked her weapon, her movements precise and unhurried, despite the weight of eyes upon her. A slight tremor in her hands betrayed her nerves, but her eyes remained focused, scanning the course laid out before her. The targets were positioned at challenging angles, some partially obscured, others at distances that had caused even the best shooters earlier to miss at least a few times. Chief Wallace leaned forward slightly, his interest finally genuine rather than perfunctor. As Vanessa prepared herself, something in her demeanor shifted subtly. She closed her eyes briefly, and those standing closest might have seen her lips move in what appeared to be a silent ritual. When she opened her eyes again, there was a clarity and focus that hadn't been there before. She reached beneath her collar and removed a worn leather cord from around her neck. A military medallion she hadn't shown to anyone during training. She kissed it briefly before tucking it into her pocket, the gesture triggering a memory she usually kept buried. In her mind, she was back in Afghanistan, lying perfectly still in a sniper position, overlooking a valley where intelligence had reported insurgent movement. It had been her third deployment, long after she had proven herself not just as a logistics specialist, but as one of the most precise markswomen in her unit. Her spotter, a gruff sergeant who had initially protested working with a woman, spoke quietly into his radio. "Miller just broke the course record, 3rd time this month. Command wants to know if she's using some kind of enhanced scope." The memory faded as quickly as it had come, but something of that younger soldier, determined, undefeated, remained in her expression. The buzzer sounded. Vanessa moved. Her first 3 shots hit center mass with mechanical precision that silenced the murmurs around the course. But it was her movement that caught everyone's attention. Fluid, economical. Nothing like the hesitant progress they'd witnessed during training scenarios. She transitioned between positions with the efficiency of someone who had done this hundreds of times before. Each step purposeful, each pause minimal, was no wasted motion, no uncertainty. Every shot landed exactly where she intended. When her weapon unexpectedly jammed halfway through the course, an all too convenient equipment malfunction, She cleared it in seconds without breaking her concentration or rhythm. The final target, positioned at what most considered an almost impossible distance for the issued handgun, received her last bullet directly through its center mark. The timer stopped. Complete silence fell over the range. The time flashed on the electronic scoreboard. She had beaten the previous best score by 12 seconds. Her accuracy 100%. Captain Reynolds checked the scores twice, his face pale and confused before confirming the results with a tight nod. Chief Wallace whispered something to his deputy, his expression unreadable, but his attention fully captured. For several long moments, no one spoke. The male candidates who had been so vocal in their criticism now stared in disbelief. Lieutenant Rogers was the first to break the silence, asking what everyone wanted to know. "Where did you learn to shoot like that, Miller?" His voice carried a mixture of shock and emerging respect. The other instructors moved closer, suddenly interested in the answer. Vanessa ejected the empty magazine and saved her weapon before turning to face them. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was calm and clear, carrying across the now silent range. "Army Marksmanship Instructor, 5th Special Forces Support Team. I trained the people who designed this course." She holstered her weapon with practiced ease. "My full military record was in my application file. I assumed you'd read it." The simplicity of her answer made its impact all the more powerful. She hadn't been hiding her abilities. They had simply never bothered to look beyond their assumptions. Chief Wallace stepped forward, his earlier dismissiveness replaced by genuine curiosity. "Why didn't you say something earlier?" Vanessa met his gaze steadily. "With all due respect, sir, I was told this program tests what we can do, not what we say we can do. I wanted to be judged by the same standards as everyone else." She paused, then added quietly, "Besides, in real operations, your credentials don't matter. Your performance does." The chief had no immediate response to this, but for the first time since Vanessa had entered the program, he looked at her as a professional rather than a problem. Behind him, several of the male candidates exchanged uncomfortable glances, reconsidering their own behavior over the past weeks. Reynolds stood with his clipboard clutched tightly, looking as though the foundation he stood on had suddenly shifted beneath his feet. The ripple effects of Vanessa's performance spread quickly through the department and beyond. By that evening, videos of her shooting qualification had circulated through private messaging groups among officers. By the next morning, someone had leaked footage to the local media. The same news station that had questioned the wisdom of female SWAT candidates now ran a different headline. "Former military elite breaks SWAT course record." A reporter dug into Vanessa's military background, uncovering commendations that had never been mentioned in her police department file, including a Silver Star awarded after an ambush that had left her unit pinned down. She had provided covering fire that allowed the evacuation of 3 wounded soldiers, maintaining her position despite sustaining shrapnel injuries. The medal she carried wasn't just a memento. It was one of the highest honors awarded for valor in combat. Diddy Council members who had been silent during her struggles suddenly called Chief Wallace, expressing their concern about the department's inclusivity practices. The police union, which had previously ignored complaints about the treatment of female officers, issued a statement celebrating the department's commitment to recruiting the best qualified candidates regardless of gender. The hypocrisy wasn't lost on Vanessa, but she recognized it as the shifting of institutional winds rather than genuine transformation. Real change would require more than one dramatic moment, but moments like these created openings that hadn't existed before. 1 week after qualification day, Chief Wallace held a press conference in the department's main lobby. With cameras rolling and reporters filling the room, he announced Vanessa's acceptance into the SWAT team with practiced enthusiasm, though his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Today represents a historic moment for our department," he declared, gesturing for Vanessa to join him at the podium. "Officer Miller's exceptional performance demonstrates our commitment to excellence above all else." What he didn't mention was the emergency meeting held the previous night, where department legal counsel had outlined the potential discrimination lawsuit they would face if they rejected her after such a public and documented display of superiority. The force of policy compliance had finally aligned with Vanessa's demonstration of excellence, creating a momentum that even the most resistant leaders couldn't openly oppose. Behind the scenes, a quiet reorganization took place. An anonymous tip to the Internal Affairs Division revealed that Lieutenant Rogers had altered application requirements specifically for female candidates over the past 3 years. The investigation found emails discussing how to discourage the wrong elements from joining specialized units. By the end of the month, Rogers was reassigned to desk duty supervising equipment inventory, a public demotion that sent a clear message throughout the department, though Vanessa never confirmed it. Many suspected she had been the source of the information. In truth, she hadn't needed to be. Once the spotlight of public attention focused on the department's practices, multiple officers who had witnessed the discrimination but remained silent now found the courage to speak up. Captain Reynolds awkwardly approached Vanessa after her first official SWAT team meeting, his earlier hostility replaced by professional courtesy tinged with embarrassment. "The department could benefit from your experience," he said, avoiding direct eye contact. "We'd like to offer you the team leader position for marksmanship training." The position would have given her authority over many who had belittled her, a chance for the kind of vindication most would have savored. Vanessa considered the offer for only a moment before shaking her head. "I appreciate that, Captain, but I'm here to be part of the team, not run it. Let me earn their respect first." Her refusal to embrace a power play surprised him, but he nodded with newfound respect. What she didn't add was that leading marksmanship training would have compartmentalized her again. The woman shooter rather than a full SWAT officer. She hadn't fought this hard to be placed in another box, even if it came with a title, during her first few weeks on the team. Reporters sought interviews about the discrimination she had faced. Each time, Vanessa redirected the conversation. "Every department has room for improvement. I'd rather focus on the work ahead than dwell on the past." She refused to cast herself as a victim or her new colleagues as villains, even when pressed for details that could have made compelling headlines. Instead, she quietly met with the department's HR director to establish new training protocols that would ensure fair treatment for all candidates, regardless of gender. The changes were implemented without fanfare, presented as operational improvements rather than corrections of past wrongs. This approach allowed the department to save face while still making necessary changes, a pragmatic compromise that Vanessa understood would yield more lasting results than public shaming. Gradually, the male teammates who had once mocked her began to approach for shooting tips, which she provided without ever mentioning their past behavior. The shift room that had once gone silent when she entered now included her in pre-shift planning and post-shift debriefings. Detective Parker, who had laughed at her application months earlier, stopped her in the hallway one afternoon, his discomfort evident as he searched for words. "I was wrong about you," he finally said. "Most of us were." Vanessa simply nodded. "Let's make sure the next woman doesn't have to break records to be taken seriously." She walked away before he could respond, leaving him to consider what that might mean. Rather than focusing on her own advancement or dwelling on past slights, Vanessa established a mentorship program for female officers interested in tactical positions. She operated it during her off-seasons, using her own experience to prepare women for both the physical challenges and the cultural barriers they would face. When a senior officer questioned whether this created special treatment, Vanessa invited him to observe a session. "I'm teaching them to exceed the standards," she explained as they watched women practicing advanced shooting techniques, not asking anyone to lower them. He left without further comment, but 2 weeks later, the department officially incorporated her training methods into their academy curriculum. The change came with no acknowledgement of its source, but Vanessa didn't need credit. She needed results. 6 months after joining SWAT, Vanessa responded to her first critical incident, a hostage situation at a downtown office building on Congress Avenue. A former employee had returned with a grudge and a semi-automatic weapon trapping 14 people on the 10th floor. As the team prepared for breach, Vanessa noticed a detail in the building's schematics that others had missed. A service corridor that would allow a single officer to flank the suspect without crossing his line of sight. "If we create a distraction at the main entrance," she suggested quietly to the team leader, "someone could approach from behind through this passage." The leader, initially skeptical, reviewed the plans and approved the strategy. Vanessa was assigned to the main entry team while another officer took the flanking position. A reasonable tactical decision, but one that still reflected lingering doubts about her abilities in the field. The operation went exactly as planned, with the hostage-taker surrendering after finding himself suddenly vulnerable from behind. As the team debriefed afterward, Captain Reynolds acknowledged her contribution publicly. "Miller's tactical assessment saved lives today. That's the standard we all aspire to." The words were simple, but represented a complete reversal from his earlier dismissal of her capability. Several team members nodded in agreement, no longer seeing her as an outsider, but as a valuable colleague. For Vanessa, this moment of professional recognition meant more than any public accolade. It was acceptance based purely on merit, the exact equal treatment she had fought for from the beginning. The most profound change came in less visible ways. Female officers from other districts and even neighboring departments began reaching out, asking about the SWAT qualification process. 2 more women joined Austin's tactical training program the following cycle, neither facing the systematic barriers Vanessa had encountered. When a new male trainee made a disparaging comment about one of them, his fellow male candidates shut him down immediately. "That kind of talk doesn't work here anymore." The culture was shifting, not through grand gestures or public mandates, but through the quiet persistence of excellence that could no longer be denied. By refusing to accept failure, Vanessa had created a blueprint that others could follow, proof that the barriers weren't as impenetrable as they had seemed. A year after her qualification day, Vanessa led a training session for new recruits, both men and women. The department's diversity had notably improved. not just in terms of gender, but in backgrounds and perspectives. As she demonstrated a tactical room entry technique, the recruits noticed the medallion now proudly visible around her neck, the same one she had kissed before her qualifying round. One brave recruit asked about it after the session. It belonged to a friend. Vanessa explained, touching it briefly. She died because someone on her team wasn't properly trained. Every time I teach these techniques, I'm honoring her memory. The medallion had transformed from a hidden talisman to a visible symbol of purpose, a reminder of why standards matter beyond pride or tradition. Her journey had come full circle, from hiding her abilities to openly using them to prevent the kind of tragedy that had once driven her from military service. During a break, she noticed a female recruit looking uncertain after struggling with a particular technique. Vanessa approached her privately away from the others. "The hardest target isn't on any range," she told the young woman, adjusting her stance slightly to improve her stability. "It's breaking through barriers that people insist are there for good reasons." The recruit looked up, grateful for the guidance, but still hesitant. "How did you not lose it when they treated you so badly? Everyone knows your story now." Vanessa smiled slightly, considering her answer carefully. "Because the fight was never about proving them wrong," she said finally. "It was about proving what was right." She watched the recruit practice the corrected technique, hitting the target consistently now. Excellence doesn't need to announce itself. It just needs to persist until it cannot be ignored. Later that evening, as Vanessa packed up her gear, she paused to watch new candidates practicing on the range that had once been the site of her greatest challenge and vindication. Some showed natural talent, others determined effort. All of them now trained under standards designed to find the best qualified, not the most traditional. The department wasn't perfect. No institution built by humans ever could be. But it was evolving in ways that would make it stronger, more adaptable, and ultimately more effective at the mission they all shared: protecting their community. True strength isn't measured by how hard you can hit, but by how long you can stand when everyone expects you to fall. Vanessa Miller hadn't just earned her place on the SWAT team. She had transformed what that place meant for everyone who would follow. And in doing so, she had found her own path to healing the wounds of her past. Would you have the courage to stand alone, knowing your struggle might open doors for those who follow? In America today, this battle continues in firehouses, boardrooms, and yes, even police departments across the nation. Sometimes the most powerful way to change the system isn't to tear it down, but to excel within it so undeniably that it must either evolve or expose its own failings for all to see.